Welcome back. W this week and the two-headed quarterback situation headed to Atlanta. But I want to talk some baseball around here. I binge read the book Astro Ball to get all of my facts together on Mike Elias as well as Sig Mejdal. At least I've learned how to pronounce it. I've had this guy on many, many times. We always enjoy our baseball chats with senior writer from ESPN and the worldwide leader. We welcome Eddie Matz back onto the program. You can follow him and his Purple Sunset over the warehouse in Camden Yards at ESPN. Eddie Matz out on Twitter. Well, Eddie, they've at least, I guess they won the press conference last Monday, right? I know you were a part of that, and John Angelos and Lou Angelos standing up for the first time ever, really, in sort of that forum. But more than that, they brought the prettiest girl to the dance. They put the money out and spent the money on a new way to do business, and I think a lot of people are very energized by that and should be.
Yeah, I love the fact that you called him the prettiest girl because he really is very handsome.
He is a handsome man. Michael
very
Elias.
Easy on the eyes, which
looks like he went to Yale to me. Looks like a Yale man. Yes.
He's like he's got the good face, right? And not that matters, but he's got the good. He seems to have the good everything, right? Like more importantly, he seems to have the good brain, which I feel like as the people who live in Baltimore and follow the Orioles, it's like you're constantly looking around at these young, bright executives that other teams are hiring and employing, and then you look at what Baltimore's had, and Duquette's done a fine job, but he just doesn't seem to fit the mold of what's been creeping into front offices these last 5-10 years. So they hired this guy, Mike Elias, and he, his resume and all the looks and appearances are that he is exactly that kind of guy. The only thing he lacks is direct experience in that general manager's job. But, if you buy into smart people can do whatever they want, then he's the guy for the job.
Well, and he brings Sig Mejdal with him, and he brings the NASA rocket scientist, and they bring a fistful of rings from St. Louis and Houston, and they bring analytics, and they bring the blackjack table, and they bring all of the shifting and all of the minor league way that it was taught in Houston. And having read the book and having seen the result and knowing that you have to draft smart guys, and they made mistakes, and all of that's, well documented as well, it's kind of hard to knock the system of where this thing is going because this is modern baseball. This is the way you have to play, especially when you have less money than everyone else.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly seem to have, where they've been, they figured out how to do it, and the Orioles certainly could use that kind of pedigree. Obviously it's not, there's no formula to it, right? If it were, then it'd be easy and it would be completely predictable and it wouldn't be exciting and there's no unknown. So, it's not, we don't know for sure that that's going to happen, that there's going to be a turnaround. It seems like it's only a matter of time and they'll do the right job and get it done. The question is, if and when there is that turnaround, how long will it take? And that was the thing that, in the press conference, Elias was talking about how, I forget his exact words, but he talked about speeding up the process. He said there are no shortcuts, but he said obviously we'd like to do it as quick as possible. But it's just going to take time. The question is going to be how painful is it going to be for Orioles fans as they sit around and watch? Because look, right now, they don't even have a manager at the time of the press conference. That was he's like, yeah, we might not have a manager until after winter meeting. Clearly, they're in no hurry, which they can't be because these things take time. But it's disconcerting if you have to sit back and just watch and put your hands under your tush and bite your tongue.
If you are writing the book on this and the recommendations and where you go and starting from scratch, and whenever Sig Mejdal breaks his silence, I have some people on the inside on all of this. These guys were looking for a train wreck. They literally were looking for the worst situation where they would be paid at top of market, and by most accounts, they've set the market for what they got from the Angelos family at a time where managers, we're not going to see the Mike Sochas and the Joe Maddens and the Girardis getting $6 and $7 million a year to manage anymore. So they've gone about this whole thing a different way, and I think all of us at 50,000 feet say, all right, well, so what are you going to do to get us excited? And more than that, Astro Ball is one thing in competing with in those markets, competing with the Red Sox and the Yankees and where they're going. And I know the Rays did a good job of that this year. It's sort of getting back on the bike. And I know the Blue Jays and the Orioles 3 years ago took advantage of the Yankees and the Red Sox getting fat, slow, and old and all that stuff. But I wonder, what will this look like if it ever gets better? I would think the international scouting part of this and drafting better and all of that, but also bringing in really good baseball people at the minor league level to get these guys trained to get them to the big leagues, because I think the Orioles have lacked so many things in so many ways over 25 years. I'm heartened to think that this thing from an instructional level will get a lot better. The Oriole way, you know?
Yeah, I think they need to improve their development, no doubt. But I think it's, Elias wasn't going to throw anybody under the bus. He said something to the effect of, I like what we have here in the system. I think there are guys who, we have the tools here. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think regardless of what kind of developmental people you bring, even if whatever's wrong in the developmental program, regardless of what they do, I don't think they currently have in stock what they need to turn this thing around. So I think it's going to take bringing in new development people or process, whatever it is. And then also, to your point, the international market, the drafting, it's going to be all new people that are going to be on the shelves there in inventory. Those are the things that those are the people that they need to produce. They need to hit on some draft picks and some international signings, and they need to develop them, not screw them up, not blow out their arms. So that's why it's going to be longer rather than shorter for me, because I don't think, it's not like there's a bunch of studs in the minor league system right now that they can bring in a couple people who know how to do it and turn them around, and all of a sudden these guys are in the major leagues in 1, 2, 3 years. I don't think, for all the praise that Duquette in the front office got for all those prospects that they brought in for those trades this past year, I talked to some people that question that. They don't think that the Orioles got a whole lot quality-wise. They got quantity, obviously, but quality-wise in return, there's a lot of question marks, I think. So I think the international piece is going to be huge, because forever now the Orioles have just had their heads buried in the sand when it comes to that, and you just cannot compete in today's baseball world like that. You look around the league, and a third or more of the league's best players of the league period are international players, and the Orioles just weren't in that market. So that's going to be huge for them.
Eddie, it is interesting. You'd say all that, and the boys came out, and I'm famously banned. You were in the press conference. They let Luke in. Luke asked a question about Brady Anderson that they didn't hear the question. It was like a Putin press conference or something. And I'm going to pass judgment on the boys when I see it and as I see it. And you've just already passed a judgment on them to say, well, they let Dan Duquette make all these deals, and then it was like propping him up like Weekend at Bernie's, and they threw him off the boat, and they didn't get much. And obviously the Gausman thing was a bit of a salary dump with O'Day. I've got to judge them on that curve already. I mean, their first decision really was to allow Dan Duquette to make all those deals and then throw him out. And then the Brady Anderson thing always sort of looms over all of this. And this will be the real test for how these guys are going to manage this thing differently. It's going to be different than the old man, there's no doubt. But how is it? Is it more competent, less competent? I don't know that that's possible. Certainly, I don't know that it can be any more profitable than it was under the old man and what he did with Masson. And they may have to write a $400 million check by the end of the month to their Masson partners in Major League Baseball. So this is a tender time for them and their decisions. And I need to grade them on the same curve that I grade Steve Bisciotti and anybody else. And so far, yeah, I mean, they got the prettiest girl at the dance. Now, are they going to let him do his job? And where's Brady Anderson? Why in the world did you allow Dan Duquette to deal off Kevin Gausman? I mean, for a bag of donuts. I mean, that's part of the weirdness of all of this, because I'm trying to pay attention to all of it, because they are going to be sort of a dark franchise over the next couple of years, because they're going to lose a lot of baseball games. That's what's going to happen on the outside. I'm wondering what's happening back in the kitchen. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm not ready to judge the John and Lou yet, because I can't. So I think the stuff that happened with Duquette, in an ideal world, I think the person who makes those trades last summer is also the person who's doing the rebuild, right? The person who's making the bed is the person who's sleeping in it. But it's impossible to know exactly what's going on inside the warehouse. Who knows how much influence, and even though Peter reportedly isn't well right now, like, who knows what influence he had. Maybe he wanted to keep Duquette in there. There's just so many things that you can't possibly know. So for me, whatever opinion I'm forming started with the press conference recently. And what impressed me, I thought it was cool that both the brothers were there, and I liked the atmosphere that they set up there. And
I called it the Orange Hookah Lounge.
Yeah. And I didn't really know either of the brothers prior to, I've never really heard them talk at length prior to this press conference. I was really impressed, actually, especially with John, with what he had to say, and of course they're gonna say all the right things. They're gonna pause on the questions that they don't want to answer directly, like the one that Luke asked. Right? You can't really fault them for that. That's like news isn't being broken at press conferences like that these days. That's not how it happens. So,
well, my question would have been real simple, Eddie. Who's in charge? Yeah, literally. Like, I'm not being a jerk.
Well, but Mike Elias is in charge. We know. So
no. Who's in charge of the franchise? Who's running? Steve Bisciotti runs the Ravens. Dick Cass sits under him. Jerry Jones runs the Cowboys and his boys. Bob Kraft. It's just, Hal Steinbrenner runs the Yankees. It's just. That's the issue here that I need to buy into.
No, I get
Who's
it.
running
I get
it? Who's in charge?
Maybe I'm naive, and I am naive. Like, I'll admit that. I like to see the good people, but I believed what John said, which is that they're pretty much they hired the right guy, and they're going to get out of the way and let him do his job. Until I see evidence to the contrary, that's what I think is going to happen. I think it's what needs to happen, and I think that the brothers are smart enough. Not that their father isn't, but for a variety of reasons, that's just not the way that it works. But I think they're smart enough to understand that, and that they're smart enough to understand that this thing is going to work best if they get out of the way and let people do their jobs. So for now, that's what I'm believing.
Somebody's got to get out in front of it, though, right, Eddie? I mean, the ballpark's going to be lonely and empty, and they don't even have anybody to put on a garden gnome or a bobblehead. Like, you know what I mean? And, bringing back Eddie Murray and Brooks and having them run around and giving them $50,000 on a week. It's a wonderful thing. I mean, we all wonder where that's been the last 25 years, and the statues out in the courtyard. All that's a wonderful thing. I'm just not sure where this is going the next 3, 4, 5 years as the Camden Yards lease comes up, as they're going to get sued again and again and again until the Nationals and the Major League Baseball partners exact whatever the $1, $2, $3, $400 million they're going to be getting out of this. I'm wondering where the money's coming from, Eddie. I mean, I really am worried about the future of the franchise because I know it's going to stink on the field the next couple of years. That's obvious, and I know maybe it'll come around in 2023 or 24 because that's sort of the trajectory they're going to take as the house has been burned down. I'm just wondering how bad this is going to get the next 4 years and who gets out in front of it to kind of make it healthier at a time where the 9 innings they're going to play, look, man, you're there all the time, right? I mean, the mustard races are more interesting than who's coming in out of the bullpen in the 7th inning.
It's going to suck. It's going to be brutal. It's going to be hard to watch. But I don't know what you can do to get out in front of it. I think everyone already knows. Look, so there's two issues here. One is the on-field product and how horrible it's going to be to sit through it and watch it. And then the other point about the finances and all that. Who knows? Like, nobody knows. That's part of what's so frustrating about it is nobody really knows what the situation is, the bottom line, and what all the books look like. So don't know that. Can't guess that. What we do know is that it's going to suck these next few years to be an Orioles fan. There's just no way around that. But I don't know that, like, the whole getting out in front of it thing, they'll do whatever they can to, Greg Bader and his team, they're gonna do whatever they can to market this team that seems virtually unmarketable, but they're not the first team to ever be in this position. Fortunately, I think that what's good about it is that there is a little bit of data now. You can look at a team like the Astros, who sucked for a few years, got some high draft picks, made a couple deals, and look what happened. So that gives a franchise like the Orioles, who are in this tenuous situation right now, it gives them almost, I don't want to say credibility, but you can point at that and go, look, Orioles fans, if we play our cards right, this is what can happen. So it almost gives that's kind of like you get out in front of it by going backwards and saying, look, this is the track record of teams who have been in this situation. And by the way, Mike Elias was part of that rebuild, right? So I think that's about as much as you can get out in front of it.
ESPN Eddie Matz is the way to find him. He is out at the Worldwide Leader doing baseball, doing winter meetings, trying to figure out who the Orioles manager is going to be. And then there's sort of the inherent issues here with Chris Davis and the money there and, the Villars, the guys they have around, the Mancinis, the guys that are involved in this thing, what becomes of them and how they're utilized. Where do you see the Chris Davis story going? I mean, this is a fascinating, unprecedented thing. I can't imagine they're going to prop him up and give him 500 more at-bats and let him bat a $168 this summer, I don't think, right?
You wouldn't think so, but that question was asked also during the press conference, and Elias was pretty clear about that. He said the Orioles are a more dangerous lineup with a good. Was it Elias or was it John? I forget which one, but one of them it might have been Angelos who said, you tell me, I can't even remember, but one of them said, Orioles are a better, more dangerous lineup with Chris Davis in there when he's doing what he can do. So, and Elias said he's even going to be part of the off-season preparation, right? He's going to be privy to it. He's not just going to sit back and let Davis do whatever he does. So, I don't know. It's if there's a repeat of this past season, next season, it's hard. How many more times can they do that? But on the flip side is, could there possibly be a repeat of next season, last season, next season? Like Chris Davis was as bad as it gets last year. Could that possibly happen again? Right? It doesn't seem like it could. Whether it's him finally figuring out, okay, I need to use the field more, or, geez, I don't know. But for now, that's who they have there, right? Like they don't have much. And based on last year, I guess you would say he's not much. But if he even if he comes even like remotely close to what he was prior to last year, then you've got like a reasonably useful guy, I suppose. But I mean, all last season and the last couple seasons, we've all thought like this can't continue. He's got to snap out of it and become Chris Davis of mid 2010s. But it hasn't happened. So I don't know. Maybe it could continue.
I've joked about like if he could
prepared to ride it out though.
Yeah, if he get at 230, I've just said, well, you're going to pay him this $100 million anyway, so at least get like a high A prospect out of it at the trading deadline if somebody needs a designated hitter or whatever they would need in late July. If he can ever become serviceable, if ever he can become Trumbo or whatever it's supposed to be at this point. Eddie, the other thing I would say was I was at the football game over the weekend and Adam Jones took a bow and did his low-cash country music thing and all that stuff. And I said, well, that'll be the last cheer he hears here as an Oriole. I can't imagine that there's any scenario that brings him back in this rebuild era. What happens to him? Or guys like him? Guys like him didn't do well in the market last year. It will be interesting to see where he lands because I don't think there's any obvious landing spot for a guy like him. But I know everyone here will be very interested in where he lands and care about him.
Yeah, I could envision a world in which he returns. Like you said, the market is such an unknown. I think if it were 2 or 3 years ago where the market was so much more player-friendly, it's a different story. It remains to be seen how this winter will play out. But if it's anything like last season, then there's going to be a bunch of guys out there just like holding their jockstraps, waiting for a job. And despite his resume, he could very well be one of those guys. And if that's the case, he's got his family here. He's got strong ties to the community. A rebuild is a rebuild, but, you could still use a leader like him. So, there's reasons why he would want to stay here. I could see a reason why the Orioles would want to keep him here, especially if the market deflates his value and they don't have to overpay for him. So, I could definitely envision a world in which he returns here. But at the same time, I could see a lot of other teams who just are looking for like a veteran leader presence, maybe like a fourth outfielder type. Crazy to think that we're talking about Adam Jones as that guy, and he's only 32 years old. But, yeah, I could see him landing in a bunch of different places. But Baltimore, believe it or not, is one of them.
How about the Philadelphia Phillies this offseason, right? They will be the big story once everything settles in Vegas and how much money Machado's going to get and where he's going to go and not be Johnny Hustle, of course, and Bryce Harper. Next couple of weeks, this is going to be a very, very active, I would say it's going to be a hot stove instead of a warm stove, at least for the big names and the big money and the big suitors and the teams that, quite frankly, not to be disrespectful to the Orioles, but the teams that are actually trying to win and believe they can win next year. There are some players out there that are going to contribute to that greatly, and a lot of dough being tossed around after a year last year where there was no dough tossed around.
Yeah, although I'd be surprised. It's going to be fascinating to watch. Like, it's going to be one of the more interesting off seasons that I can remember. But I'd be surprised if any of that big movement happens anytime soon, especially with Harper and Machado, right? Because it's going to be a staring contest, right? If they were, if they had the same agent, maybe it wouldn't be that way. But they've got different agents, so each one's going to want to wait for the other one to set the market and then go higher. So I can envision that taking until late January, maybe. Although, if you're a team that is signing one of those guys, you want to get on them a little bit earlier because you want to build your marketing campaign around them to some extent. So, but I'd be shocked if anything happened at winter meetings. I'd be surprised if anything happens with either of those guys before the new year. But you mentioned the Phillies. I can't imagine that they're not going to get at least one of those guys. That would be a huge surprise to me. Machado seems like the more likely one, but I could envision them getting Harper too. Could they get both? Maybe. Their owner talked about spending stupid money. It's crazy to think that those two guys could end up on the same squad. What I wonder is, do they even want to be on the same squad, right? They were roommates back when they were teenagers for Team USA, and so they've known each other for a long time. So in theory, they probably get along fine. But on the other hand, they're both kind of, they obviously have egos. They're superstars. They're competitors. Do they even want to be in the same clubhouse? I don't know the answer to that. What do you think? You think those guys would
I'm the man. No, you're the man. No, I'm the man. No, you're the man. Hey, the Golden State Warriors are trying to figure it out, right? I mean, it is a team sport. They don't play the same position. So, I would think they have a better chance of actually winning together than apart. And Machado came very close to doing that this year. And I don't know that the bloom's off his rose or whatever, but, both of these guys have a little knucklehead, at various points. Certainly Machado much more for me than, another guy who got strangled in the dugout by one of his teammates. But neither one of these guys come at it from, the Cal Ripken, Tony Gwynn school, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, no, if I'm too, they're both good players. They both add value. For me, though, if I'm picking one, I'm definitely taking Machado. Just defensively, it's completely different than what Harper brings. I don't love Machado as a shortstop, but if I'm looking for a third baseman, I'll take him all day long.
Do you love a $30 million for either one of them, or is there a frugality, or, hey, it's not your money, and I get that part of it, but if you are someone building something with a budget, is it money well spent to think that Manny Machado will still be worth $30 million a year when he's 34, 5, 6, 7?
It depends on the length. It depends on the length of the deal. If I'm paying $30 million a year for 4 to 6 years, which puts both those guys into their early 30s, right? Like 32. I could live with that. I wouldn't do a 10-year deal at $30 million a year, but these days those deals don't work out like that. Like, we call them 10-year deals, but they're not really 10 years. Like, let's say it's 10 years at $30 million, so that's 300 over the life of the contract. I don't think ownership thinks about it that way. They think about it's like 6 or 7 years, so it ends up being, you spread that $300 million over the 6 or 7 years, so it ends up effectively being like $43 million a year, and if they happen to produce on the back end of that contract, great. So the life of the contract is kind of a misnomer for me.
Well, the road is littered with the Hamiltons and the pool hole. We can go through the list, right, of the bad A-Rod, for crying out loud. So no one wants to be saddled with that, but that's what happens. You get 3 or 4 teams in a room and everybody's laying it out there. That's how this will happen. That's how the 8th and 9th and 10th years wind up, because somebody wants to get it done, right? Literally.
Yeah, but I would pay for the $30 million. I think a year or two ago we were talking more like $35, $40 million. 30 seems more like a reasonable number now, and given what the market is, what other guys have made in free agency over the past couple of years, I don't think $30 million is unreasonable. If I were an owner, I would be willing to do that. The only reason I wouldn't is because neither of those guys to me are model citizens. There's just something missing, whether it's the Johnny Hustle thing or Harper just seems kind of brooding and moody, which so does Machado at sometimes. They're both great players, and they both have plenty of positives, but neither of them seem to be like that poster child that you can certainly market around them, because despite those foibles, people love them, right? They have huge followings, but they're not like the shining example of everything you would ever want in a ball player and in the face of a franchise for whatever reason. But all that said, I would still spend 30. I would do it on Manny before I would Bryce, because like I said, I think he's much more of a two-way player than Bryce is.
Do me a favor and have a good time in Vegas, all right? And enjoy yourself out there. I will circle back at some point in spring training, and, I keep wondering how much baseball are we going to be talking here over the next 3 or 4 years. And, I do worry. I worry, and I know they lock me out and all that stuff, and they have all their fun with that, but I am worried about the future of the franchise here, and that's where I'll hold it, because I hope whatever they do that it works out really well, because it would be disastrous if it doesn't. 5 years from now, if we're still sitting here holding the bag, that would, after 100 lost years, that would not be good. It's a Willy Wonka tunnel we're going into here, Eddie Matz, and at least we have the Nationals down the road, right? Something like that. Appreciate you, Ed. Thanks for coming on, man.
All right.
Eddie Matz, ESPN Eddie Matz is the way to find him out on Twitter and at the worldwide leader, and heading off to the winter meetings to have a little baseball fun. I got football fun, Atlanta, Kansas City. Terps playing basketball. Wednesday night we'll be at Buffalo Wild Wings for the ACC matchup. $2.50 pints and happy hour going on. They also got the $5 game day menu always at Buffalo Wild Wings in Bel Air. Appreciate their support and sponsorship as well. Also, appreciate our support and sponsorship of Strategic Factory. I got the shirt on today. Marketing, printing, promotional goods of all kinds, like the hats you wear, the signage you need, the printing, the branded apparel, the logo designs, the giveaways for your business, and they also have a strategy behind it, hence Strategic Factory. Learn more at strategicfactory.com. Also, our friends at Costas Inn. If you're feeling crabby, and I am, they keep sharing those pictures. I had some crabs in October. I went out for a World Series game I watched with the fellas over there. Jazz night, that's Wednesday night. So when I go for crabs, it's going to be on a Wednesday night. So I'm hoping to get the Costas in before Christmas and do that. Pit Beef, the bands, real East Side place, Costas Inn. The legend continues down there. The buyatoyota.com is there 24 hours a day. The buyatoyota.com audio vault. There you go. The podcast central. There 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world to listen to anything we're doing about the Falcons this week, the Ravens, the Terps, and, of course, Oriole baseball, plus some rock and roll interviews as well. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. I'm on Facebook and Twitter and LinkedIn and Snapchat and Instagram and streaming live on our Facebook as well as our YouTube WNSTV channel. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.